All is right with the world. Playoff drought's ending this year. Come on, man. That was a beautiful performance last night.
Tuesday overreactions.
Oh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. We'll take the overreaction out of this. The overall performance from the team last night was very good.
Oh, I thought they got off to a really bad start. I thought they couldn't hit a shot early on, and the offense looked really, really clunky. And look, if Mike Brown if he's gonna stick with his KZ Akpala idea, which I'm not saying is a bad idea because I think he's a tremendous defender. But if he's gonna stick with that lineup, KZ's got to hit 3-pointers, and De'Aaron Fox has to hit 3-pointers, and Sabonis has to hit 3-pointers. Everyone has to hit 3-pointers. You have to space the floor. And so I thought it looked a little clunky early. But I also liked Mike Brown calling timeouts, lambasting his team, sending him back out there, and having true corrections being made. And we had a couple of moments. Malik Monk got burned on a couple of plays. De'Aaron Fox got burned. Just let Russ run right by him early in the game. I thought that was preseason basketball at its finest. But the second half, what did they outscore them? 64-29. It was a lambasting in the second half, and the Kings really came out to play, even if it was the second, the third, the fourth unit.
well, James, I guess I'll bring up the question that I posed earlier, because I agree with you. If there is KZ Okpala in the starting lineup, you're going to need everybody to hit shots. But there's another move that could be made. And I don't think it's going to happen personally. But the move may be you move Keegan into the starting lineup at the 4. You got KZ Okpala as your perimeter defender, your primary perimeter defender. And that means Harrison Barnes comes off the bench. Don't think it happens, but if you are going with KZ Okpala, that's one way to get some shooting in there with everybody else around him.
Yeah, I mean, Harrison Barnes is a great shooter as well, though. So
great
I
is
mean,
he's
shot
not a great shooter. He's a
39 to 40% for the last 3 years
from 3.
Yeah, Harrison Barnes. Yeah, Harrison Barnes has been a knockdown 3-point shooter for the last couple of years, and he's a guy that for my money, he just doesn't shoot enough. That's the problem. So I mean, eventually, you hope that that Keegan can step into it. Yeah, but I'm looking at his numbers: 39.4% last year, 39.1% the year before, 38.1% the year before that, and when he got traded to the Kings, 40.8%. I mean, that's about as good as it gets.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really, really good 3-point shooter. So I'm comfortable with Harrison Barnes being in that starting lineup. And to be honest with you, I think the most interesting thing that we're seeing early on is that Keegan Murray, not only is he coming off the bench, but Keegan's playing the 3 off the bench. And we saw it in practice on Saturday, and I pointed it out. But then at the game, that's exactly what we saw. I mean, he's playing alongside Trey Lyles and Rashawn Holmes. I'll also point this out. Keegan told us early in camp that he had spent the last couple of weeks playing in the high post. And I thought that was interesting because I was like, okay, why are they playing him in the high post? Because he's devastating in the post. So if you put him on the right or the left block, that's fine. And he's also a great 3-point shooter. He can take guys off the dribble. So he's kind of a 3-level scorer. I mean, he's really more like a 2.5 level scorer. But if you're going to put him in the high post, that means he's going to be running the offense. And I think that might be what we're going to see with the second unit, is that when Sabonis steps off the floor, that Keegan Murray steps in and is that offensive cog that the Kings have been looking for off the bench. And I thought he made a couple of really nifty passes. He only ended up with, I think, 1 assist, but that's just because the Kings couldn't hit shots at all. I thought he made shots, he made passes that I didn't know he had in him, that he had the court vision to make. And they weren't anything spectacular. They were just passes that you don't make unless you're really scanning the floor. And so, yeah, I think there's some interesting things going on here.
I feel like there's a lot to talk about with Keegan Murray. You were talking about the passes that they made. Did you see the movement that you wanted to see, the movement that Mike Brown has been preaching about, the movement that Keegan and Kevin Herter and the different guys in the media scrums have talked about over the last week? Did you see that movement there, particularly from the starting unit?
I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was great, but I also don't think they played through Sabonis enough. We've heard them talk about an over-reliance on the pick and roll in the past, that this team really does get caught just running one pick and roll after another, after another, after another, until they become extremely predictable. And I can understand that. So they're going to try to go to a little bit more of a read and react system. I still want to see the pick and roll. I mean, the pick and roll, they go to the pick and roll so much because it works, especially with Sabonis and Fox. So I want to see more two-man game here and there. It doesn't have to be every possession. But I definitely would like to see an expanded offense, because I think that's something that we've seen over the last couple of years, that there comes a point where they are just like, they're boring. And the second you pull Sabonis off the court last year, I think it really shined a light on it, just how bad the offense looked before he got there. And especially when you take Halliburton out of it and sort of his ability to play in the pick and roll and set guys up. I think it's interesting. We're going to have to let Mike Brown coach this team for, certainly a couple of years, but really, like, I don't remember another season where, let's see, the Kings, they had media day on Monday, they had practice on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they had Friday off, they had practice on Saturday, and then they had a short practice before they hopped on a plane. So they had 5 days of practice with a completely new group before they played a preseason game. So this preseason game seemed like it was really pushed forward. And I think that's why we saw some of the clunkiness, a read and react system takes a long time to develop. It takes guys to get comfortable with each other. And you're doing a read and react system with realistically two players who have played together, and that's Harrison Barnes and De'Aaron Fox. It's going to take time to develop all that. And so, yeah, I think this will look a lot different in 2 weeks when the season opens up.
Yeah, I agree with you on that for sure. Do you think, talking about the starting lineup, do you think that's the starting lineup we see opening night, or was he just kind of experimenting with some stuff last night?
Yeah, I think he was experimenting, and he might experiment with that during the regular season as well. I mean, KZ Okpala is an elite defender. I've watched enough footage of him outside of, him playing with, this group or that. Like the small sample size. Like, if you really watch him play defense, he's a very, very good defender. The question is whether your offense is good enough with him in there. If the other four guys are strong enough and have a strong enough bond and chemistry to make it work, because he is going to force, teams just aren't going to defend him on the perimeter until he proves he can hit the 3-point shot. If that's the case, they're going to just clog the lanes, and Fox and Sabonis are going to have a really difficult time. But as far as like a defensive cog, I look at Matisse Thybulle and with the 76ers, and we all know that, like, that guy, he averaged 3 points a game one year starting. That's just not going to fly for the Kings. They don't have a Joel Embiid, and they don't have a James Harden and a Tobias Harris. Like, the combination of players that are around him make it work. Even, they always have a 3-point shooting guard that's in the backcourt, whether it's Maxey or Danny Green in the past. Like, that works because you have such good offensive players. The Kings are going to have to show that they can be that kind of offensive team. And when Fox starts the game 1 for 6 from the field and isn't hitting his 3-point shots, and Sabonis isn't taking 3-point shots, and Okpala is going to be difficult to pitch in that situation. Those other guys have to carry the weight in order for Okpala to work.
ESPN 1320, Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, James Ham with D'Lo and KC here on KIFM West Sacramento, 98.5 FM, KRXQ, HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320, driven by last year's Elk Grove Dodge, always live on the very free Odyssey app. We're also on twitch.tv/ESPN 1320, youtube.com/ESPN 1320 if you want to watch the show. Is KZ Okpala in the starting lineup perhaps an indictment on the defensive efforts of the other four?
No. I just think that, you're going to try something. And it really does, like I talked about this on the podcast we just had, and I've got a piece going up in a little while. Like, my first year covering this team, I'll tell, like, that first year, Marcus Landry was signed to the team, right? So we got to training camp, and it was supposed to be like Dante Green and Omri Caspi battling it out against each other for the starting small forward spot. Well, Carl Landry's little brother, Marcus Landry, was signed to like a summer contract and showed up to camp. And Paul Westphal ended up starting him the first 2 games. And Marcus Landry was really good and probably deserved to not only make the team, which he did not 2 weeks later, but he probably deserved to play. And they had brought in, I think it was Antoine Wright. They had some other guys that they were going to try at that position and like mix and match and do all this stuff. But at the end of the day, that's an example of where just because you play someone in preseason doesn't even mean they're going to make the team. Just because you're starting them in preseason, and that I don't think that will be the case with KZ. I think he will make the team, but I also know that like most NBA coaches, they don't want to put their best 5 players in the starting 5 because then where are you going to go from there? That's it. Like if something's gone wrong, you've already put your best players out there. You got to have something else in reserve on the bench. And that's why I think we are seeing Keegan Murray on the bench right now, because I think he is one of their best 5 players. But for right now, it makes more sense. He's going to get more touches with that second unit. And the fact is that if they decide that Okpala isn't the answer, that doesn't necessarily mean that Keegan Murray is the answer. It could mean that Okpala falls completely out of the rotation and they go to someone different, Trey Lyles, or they go to Chima Moneki. They just try something completely different at that position to give them a different look than what they're already putting out there. So I think people shouldn't read too much into game 1 of preseason. If it's game 2, game 3, and he's still the starter, then KZ Okpala is probably going to be the starter. But even that, how long will it last if their offense isn't working?